Hello and welcome to the Outlaws podcast with Kate and Shayla for professionals unlearning the rules of work and life. Ditch the shoulds and build what fits. In this Outlawbrary episode, we're talking about mattering, the secret to building a life of deep purpose and connection by Jennifer Breheny Wallace, and explore a quiet but confronting idea that achievement on its own doesn't create fulfillment.
In this episode, we're going to explore Wallace's concept of mattering, from burnout and loneliness to leadership and culture. We talk about what happens when success is built on performance alone and what shifts when connection and contribution come back into focus. We also share our own reflections as we go. Is mattering something you can actually build into your life and work, or does it just sound good in theory? And what does it really look like to create a life where people feel like they count?
So, Outlawbrary number 3 for this series, I think, isn't it? For season 2. So, mattering. We chose this book because we felt like it was actually really relevant to work lives. She talks about this idea of mattering. And what she says about mattering is it's the feeling that we're valued and have an opportunity to add value in life.
Yes.
And she says it's a core human need and it's really important to our well-being. And so really this book is just an exploration of that idea, isn't it?
I actually quite liked this book. And to be fair, I feel probably have to say that you're the one who chose the 5 types of wealth. So I could be free in my criticisms. Whereas in this one, I was the one who saw it and chose it. It's kind of obvious in a way, but maybe it's just obvious because this is stuff that we spend time thinking about. So maybe it's not as obvious as I thought it was after I read it.
Yeah, and so I started reading it. So I was excited about it when I originally got it, and then I started reading it, and I found the first third a little bit hard. I felt like it was a bit, like How to Suck Eggs. But again, going back to that same comment of the 5 types of wealth, I think you and I are immersed in this stuff, right? We talk about it a lot. And so maybe it is obvious to us. But I felt like about a third through it kind of shrugged some of that off and it got into some more interesting stuff.
Yes. So for me, the key takeaway, not ground shattering at all, feeling valued. So mattering matters. It's a fundamental human need. It's as essential as food or safety. And her central thesis is that modern problems, burnout, loneliness, anxiety, it's not just about stress and it's not just about disconnection caused by technology. It's actually the deeper issue is what she calls an erosion of mattering. So that she sees that as really the core issue behind many of society's ills.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's where I started enjoying it, where she started really digging in a little bit more into burnout and that sort of discontent that people feel with their work. You know, that question where you say to people, how's work? And they go, oh, yeah, it's fine. And you go, whew, there could be no worse thing to say about a job than it's fine, surely. You know, that what she's saying in this book is really talking about how it is that employers can make a difference. Well, not just employers actually, but all of us can make us all feel more connected in the workplace, like we matter more. Yeah, and so I really enjoyed that. It made me reflect on some of the roles that I'd had during my career and also when I've been a leader in roles as well, like when I've tried to do that. And I think it really does help.
Yeah, she talks quite a bit about the structural issues in the workplace. And I can see how if you were reading this book and reading it at first, it really just sounds like another demand. It's like, here's how to make people matter or they feel that they matter.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I'm barely kind of getting through my days. Please don't put this on me. But she does dig into the structural difficulties. And what I really liked about what she was saying was that you really do have to prioritize yourself as well because, and I wrote this down, the quote from the book is, when a system depends on you to care for everyone else but doesn't care for you, then the work feels important but you don't. And then I also took a quote, but I can't remember the context, important but invisible. So I think she's not suggesting, and I did get this impression at some part way through the book where I thought, oh, is she just saying that we ignore all these structural difficulties and that actually it's up to individuals to create the change, because that seems like an awfully big ask on already overstretched individuals. But she doesn't. And she goes on to talk about prioritizing self-care. At first, again, when I started reading this bit, I was like, no, don't be one of those people who say, hey, if you prioritize self-care, that means that you're just able to help other people feel better more. No,
Yeah,
that's not the point. But she does
exactly.
then go on to say, because you're a human, you matter just as much as other humans as well. So the first point she makes, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right when I say this, is that she does actually say it's because it enables you to help others more. And so that, I didn't think that was a good thing to lead with. Because the other thing is, I, I, I remember a friend of mine was on LinkedIn and I just thought this was the most brilliant thing. Shout out, hello, Catherine. I don't know if she's listening to this episode, but she was taking leave and she made a particular point of saying, I'm taking leave. I'm going away for a few weeks. I'm not doing this so I can serve my clients better when I come back. I'm doing this because holidays are great and we just need to
Yeah,
take holidays. And she was making that point that she shouldn't have to justify it in the cult of productivity in which we live, that actually she wanted to take a holiday and spend time with her family, and just enjoy the summer. Or so I think
yeah.
that's a really important point too. That I think what she does. Oh, what's her first name? Sorry, Jennifer. No, oh,
Jennifer. Yeah,
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
All right, that Jennifer. I just don't want to call her Wallace. That feels a little bit kind of harsh. But
Impersonal.
no, right, but she does get to that, but I personally would have liked that to be the first sentence. Self-care matters because you're a person and you matter. So prioritizing yourself. And she also, and I think obviously I can relate to this as essentially a teacher. I'm in a university, but it's the same kind of issues a lot of the time, is that the example she used was that of a teacher who there's no end to what you can give as a teacher. Different issue
Yeah.
you're dealing with primary and secondary students. I do acknowledge that because I'm
Mm.
dealing with young adults, but adults nonetheless. But is that there's no end to what you could do. And so you do actually have to draw the line because it's not sustainable. And so I think
No.
that was a good example that she used to demonstrate that point.
I agree with that. I thought that was a good example too. So the example was that there was a teacher who was, I think she was teaching pre-primary, very young children, and she started as a teacher. She was very enthusiastic, and so she was really giving above and beyond. And then slowly she became quite disenchanted, I think, with
Mm.
essentially the system, because despite her enthusiasm and love for doing it, she could
Yeah.
see that she was feeling really discontented. It reminded me of the conversation that we had with Carly Shriver around the moral injury, and what I've taken to calling system trauma
Yes.
is that feeling that you're in a system which is just so incredibly broken, and no matter how much you're giving,
Yeah.
you can't fix it, and so you
No.
can become very, yeah, disenchanted. And she talked about how that particular teacher used the idea of mattering, so beginning to connect with some of the other teachers and starting to put some boundaries in place, but then also how it went along a bit further and she created other kind of groups of people who got together, and the teachers were engaging with each other on a kind of personal level around, yeah, feeling seen and heard from a personal perspective rather than just kind of as a teacher.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And no, and I think she does talk about somewhere too. I mean, the people who don't feel like they matter in the world, the way our world currently works,
mm,
employees who might feel like cogs, overburdened parents who feel invisible, the concern about leaving your work and then becoming irrelevant, whether through retirement or illness or something like that. And again, that's
mm,
something that's come up again and again, isn't it? How our identities are attached to what we do, um, whereas they
absolutely.
shouldn't be, but also to students. And she's written another book, actually, the name of which I forget, and how they can feel that their worth is only governed by their output, their marks that they
Yeah,
achieve, and things like that. And so, yeah, tying your worth to achievement is not just a problem that students have, but the students do feel
yeah,
their worth is tied to their marks, and of course, but then people
mm,
feel their job or their worth is tied to how much money they make or the job title they have. And I think we know enough now to know that's not a good way to judge your worth. But it's easy to say that. It's a different thing if you are
think,
facing, yeah, the end of a career and you've been an orthopedic surgeon or whatever, and you've been used to being treated in a certain
yeah,
way, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, what now? Yeah, it's. I guess the point you make is it can hit us at any time in our life, right?
yeah. I also quite liked because she talked a little bit about mattering and sort of being important in people's lives. But then she also talked about the flip side of that in mattering too much, in that when people are so reliant on you and that you have an incredibly heavy load, and that can be the opposite, where
Oh,
you
yeah.
can just feel as though you're carrying everything. So
Mm,
I thought that was a really good discussion, because
mm,
how often do you hear that from women in particular who have got big careers and who are trying to manage kids and maybe
mm.
elderly parents and everything else that's going on, and it's just like, oh my god, could everyone just stop needing me so much. So I
Yes,
think there is a bit of a balance. Yes, you want to be needed and to matter, but sometimes it's a bit much, right? Just figure your
yes,
stuff out, everyone else.
yes. Well, I guess that's where her stuff about making sure you're prioritizing yourself
Yeah,
as well, and it's a very known concept, isn't it? The sandwich generation.
yeah,
I'm
very
Gen
well.
X. I don't know what you are. Are you
I'm a
Gen
Gen
X?
X too.
Oh, are you?
Yeah,
You must be tail end Gen X though. No. Oh, no,
yeah, I
maybe
think
not.
I am.
No, I think Gen X is 1965 to 1980. Is that is that about right? Anyway, we're both
I'm
Gen X then, and
77.
I think I was reading an article about how terrible it is to be Gen X because we are the sandwich generation. We've often children later in life, and we might have very elderly parents, and so we there's a huge swathe of typically women, not only women, but typically women who are then caring for children and parents at the same time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have my children a bit younger, so I'm in that position, although I do have caring responsibilities for very elderly parents at the moment, so I've managed to shortcut the sandwich thing,
Yeah.
more like an open
But I
sandwich.
think she talked about the concept when you find yourself in that situation of personal policies, and I really liked that
Mm,
idea. So she says that they are simple, intentional rules meant to guide your daily decisions. So, for example, a personal policy might be, I don't answer emails after 7 o'clock, or
mhm,
I always take a walk during my lunch break. And I
yep,
actually really liked that idea, that and also just to take out some of the decision making in your day. So if
yeah,
someone says to you, I don't know, can you do this during your lunch break or whatever, you go, no, I always walk during my lunch break. Or,
mm,
oh, this is going to go on tonight. So can you check your emails at 8:30? No, I don't check my emails after 7. And I know not everyone is in a position where they can do that. But I think if you can find some really good personal policies that you can put in place that do feel like they're manageable to you, I feel like that's a really great idea to
yeah,
eliminate some of that decision fatigue,
mm,
and to just, yeah, give you that clarity when you might be wavering. So
yeah.
I really liked that idea. I thought that was super useful to super stressed people.
Yes, yes. Another thing I really liked about her book was the focus on doing small things, that small things matter, that it's relational. It doesn't have to be a huge grand gesture. And she often focused on things like just recognizing what people are doing and saying what you're saying to someone is, I see you, I recognize what you're doing. And then she talked about small acts matter most. So recognizing people for what they're doing and appreciating them. It's like that parenting technique. Catch your children being good. And that's such a nice thing to do, to remember if someone's doing something great, just to acknowledge that, because then, well, from a parent perspective, then they're going to do it again because they know that they've been acknowledged for it. So recognizing and appreciating people, it's actually a relatively low energy or low stakes act, really. It doesn't take much. But when you think it, try and say it, um,
Yeah.
because it does make a huge difference to someone just knowing that what you've done has been appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like, as you say, it can feel like a whole other thing that you've got to do in the workplace, but
Mm.
actually it's just being kind. That's
Yeah.
it, really. Like, if someone does something, say, thanks so much for doing that for me.
Yes.
That's made my life a bit easier today. Or,
Yeah.
I always appreciate when you do that. You're so willing to jump in or whatever. I remember when I worked at the last place where I was CEO, and, difficult client group, a lot of this system trauma and stuff going on.
Mm.
And we created a board. I can't remember what we called it, but it was essentially that when something good happened or someone did something good, that we would write it up there, because when you're working in a place like that, the system is so difficult and it can get you down.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to create something where we were recognizing the work that people were doing, even in circumstances where that might not be considered a success normally, but just really going, you did a really good job of that, advocating for that client, getting that outcome. Maybe
Yeah,
the end legal outcome wasn't the greatest thing, but there was some kind of small wins in there. I
yeah,
think that that's really important. Carly talked about there needing to be some hope, but I actually think that this concept is a bit similar to that idea of hope but mattering. So just really acknowledging that everything that everyone is doing in this broken system is making some kind of difference to the person that you're trying to help, even if it's not making a huge difference to the overall system, like
yeah.
recognizing those small things and making
And
people feel like they matter is important.
there's a corollary to that, and even though I don't think this came up in the book, but maybe holding your tongue a bit too. It does feel like it's a fairly stressful time in the world
Mm,
right about now, and of course there have been other times like this, but I do feel it's a uniquely difficult time. So everyone is under pressure. There's cost of
mm,
living pressures, and now there's the potential oil crisis and things like that. So yes, the world has gone through them before. Maybe I was just too young to remember the last oil crisis, which was in the
mm.
70s. A lot of people, I think, are under pressure. And so I guess there's two sides to that. One, it's remembering that if someone is angry or snappy, they might just be going through it at the moment and trying to not take things personally when someone does that. But also, too, to try and remember that if you're having a bad day or if you're feeling a bit prickly, that it's not that person's fault who's asking you. So to try and just remember that you do have an impact on others. I guess that's, again, you said earlier, didn't you? You said
Yeah,
this book
yeah.
is like, oh, it's teaching everyone to suck eggs, but that's kind of pretty much basic human manners. So I'm not saying anything
Yeah, yeah.
revolutionary there.
That's the point. Yeah, yeah. The other thing, so I was on a panel a few days ago with a woman called Dr. Marnie Lishman, who's a psychologist and she does a lot of work in the burnout space. And she was talking about the World Health Organization's definition of burnout, which essentially says that it's an occupational disease. So, it kind of comes from work. And I've disagreed with that for a period of time. And so when she said that she also didn't always agree with that, I was like, oh, good, I'm not the only one who thinks the World Health Organization's wrong. My previous workplace, and I've said this on numerous occasions, they were great. And I actually think they were very good at making me feel like I mattered and that the work that I did mattered. She was talking about it as an antidote to burnout. So I agree with that, like to some extent.
Mm,
I think that workplaces that don't treat people like they matter would definitely result in burnout, because when you've got people that are just absolutely working their bums off and feeling as though they don't matter, then that would definitely be the case. But I'm not always sure, in the same way that I think the World Health Organization get it a little bit wrong by saying it's only an occupational thing. I think that,
yeah.
by kind of saying if you make people matter, they won't get burnt out, doesn't quite follow.
No. And that also, too, does move away from some of those structural concerns as well. To say, well, if we're all just
Yeah.
nicer to each other in the workplace, then we're
Yeah,
not going to have any
exactly.
problems. That's not how it works. It helps. It certainly helps
Yeah, yep,
for sure. The other thing
yeah.
I thought was really cool that she talked about, although again, sorry, I'm so picky. I feel bad when she talked about be a cornerman, be in someone's
Oh, well,
corner. Can't you
yeah,
say
yeah.
corner person? I mean, please, are we
Oh,
still saying corner
yeah.
man?
I actually thought the same thing about that.
Oh, did
Yeah.
you? Okay, so I'm not just banging on about my usual kind of soapbox type
Yeah, no,
thing.
I felt as though for a new book, I thought that was a bit blind, to be honest,
Yeah, corner
instead of
man. Couldn't you say be in someone's corner? There's just such a modern way to
Yeah,
rephrase that that I'm saying corner man. It just
yeah,
jarred, but the concept behind it, of course, is magical. Whenever you have an opportunity to support someone or to cheer someone on, then that's
yeah.
a great role to take on.
Have you experienced that in your workplaces before?
Shayla, look, we've been doing this for too long. I was just about to say, I've experienced this in my workplace. I was just about to say that. The former dean of the law school where I
Yeah,
worked for many, many years, she was one of the most exceptional managers I've ever experienced. She was uniquely good. I thought she is someone who had a real knack for being able to see people really well and put opportunities in front of them. She was, I think, the best manager I've ever worked under. Everyone's going to
yeah.
know who it is if you're in Perth, but yeah, an extraordinary manager
Mm.
and an extraordinary ability to join opportunities and people up. I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever seen anyone else quite like her. So yeah, I have had particularly great opportunities where I felt seen and that I mattered and that my unique contributions were valued.
I've had a similar experience of, really great workplaces. But you do hear of really sort of awful and toxic workplaces and quite competitive as well.
Um,
So, and I think that happens a lot in the corporate world, in the commercial world, where people seem to be pitched against one another almost, so it's this competitive thing all of the time about who's going to climb the ladder and who's going to get the
yeah,
next promotion. And I think that erodes maybe people's ability to connect in a way in which she
yeah,
describes so that people feel like they matter. Because if you're viewing people as a competitor of yours, then
right.
people don't do that, right?
I must admit, that's what I found really disconcerting when I first got into legal practice.
Mm,
Colleagues were competitors in a way because you was
yeah.
jostling for billings and jostling for the good files. I was never jostling because it just didn't occur to me. And so that kind of elbows out kind of mentality. It's not in every law firm, of course. And when I practiced initially, it was the early 90s. Maybe it just wasn't as good a time. I don't know. But I suspect
Yeah.
commercial environment, that's the reality of commercial practice. And then if you're ambitious in that context, then yeah, you have to make sure that you're being strategic about the work you're taking on and
Yeah.
getting rid of stuff and all that kind of thing. I never really got into got into that. And so
Yeah.
it's not a surprise I ended up in community legal centres where there's no billings and there's no
Yeah.
competition for clients. You're all working towards the same goal. I mean, there's nothing wrong with competition, right? And I'm not suggesting it is. It's just that I know I tend not to be competitive in that way. And so it became really clear that this was not an environment in which I was going to thrive. But I do remember thinking, well, if I was that interested in money, I would have done a commerce degree. But again, commerce degrees are important and commerce is important and business is important. It's just not important to me. And so the people who should be in those environments are the
Of
people
course.
who get excited by business and get excited by that kind of thing. Whereas I was just like, couldn't care less, actually. I was about to say, sort of same for you, right, Shayla?
Yeah, same for me. And I think, when I reflect on this book a bit, there is quite a lot of focus. Am I wrong about this? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there is quite a lot of focus on not for profits and volunteers and like
Yeah.
teachers and firefighters. And, I think it might have been interesting to have a bit of an exploration into cultures that maybe don't have this kind of mattering as a value set already, where
Yes.
it's because that's where the challenge lies, really. I think it's easy to convince that sort of for purpose
Mm,
sector that this is important. They can see that already there. People are working in that sector because it aligns with their values. But
exactly.
yeah, when you're in a big corporate place where it
Mm,
is kind of all about money, I mean, maybe the lessons are the same, is that you can only do what's in your sphere of control. So,
mm,
you try and connect with your colleagues in a way that allows them to feel as though that they matter and that they're appreciated. But if you're
mm.
in an environment where it's highly competitive, I can
Uh,
imagine that would be super difficult to do,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It kind of
Yes.
almost exacerbates that in a way because the kind ones who are behind and who are focusing on whether people are being looked after have been like
Yeah.
stampeded to the ground on the way through.
And actually true. It also too, if someone who you've identified as hyper competitive and super ambitious and ready to sort of sell grandma down, the river or whatever the
Yeah.
expression is, if they started being really kind to me, I'd be suspicious. I'd be like,
What is going on here? Yeah.
yeah, it's like, "Oh, here's a cake in the break room for you." I'd be like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get trapped in the break room." So, yes,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Or they've
maybe
put something in the cake that's gonna mean that you're off your game for the rest of the day. It's like a
right.
yeah.
Maybe this isn't a book that applies in a corporate context, I don't know. But there are kind workplaces, there are really kind commercial workplaces, and I
Oh,
know
of
this
course,
because
yeah.
I have worked in one, even
Mm.
though, as I said, for me, it was still like, oh, the realities of commercial practice are just not for me. I was there when I finished up at my last job at university and I wanted to try practice again. And that to me was an exceptional practice because it did genuinely prioritize people's workplaces and it did have a pretty non-competitive, non-cutthroat culture. So it can be done, but I think it takes work. And I think it also has to take a realization from the people in charge that money is not as important. There is going to be less money
Yeah.
coming in if you're going to, allow people to do that, but you're going to retain people as well. So I guess it sort of swings and roundabouts.
And I think that is maybe easier when it's a bit smaller firm
Yes,
versus, a massive kind of big international
right.
firm. It's harder then. But look, I
Absolutely.
mean, maybe the answer is just that if you're in that kind of place and you're feeling, yeah, like you don't matter and no one really cares. I mean, maybe that's just your red flag, right? Like maybe
Mhm.
that place just isn't the right one for you. You're going to be
Mm.
wasting your time if you're sitting in there and trying to connect with your colleagues because they are on the way to the front of the line and they're pushing you
Yeah.
down on the way past. So maybe it's just, oh, this isn't the place for me. Let me try and find another place. I think it's a really relevant point that when people are feeling that something's just not quite right, they've kind of got
Mm.
that whispering in their head about this job isn't quite right. It is so possible that it's about your workplace. And it is, I think, so possible that it's because you feel like you don't matter.
Mm.
You might be able to do the same kind of work in a different workplace and feel as though you matter more and you
Yeah.
might be happier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which comes back to making those small changes, right? You don't have
Mm.
to burn everything down and walk away from whatever career you happen to be in, but it might just
No.
be that that particular workplace isn't a fit for you. But I
Right.
think it's really worth thinking about, might this be part of the reason?
So here's my key takeaway points from the book. Small acts matter, and they
Okay.
probably matter the most. That, recognizing, appreciating someone. So sometimes I think people feel shy to do it, but I'm just trying to
Yeah.
remind myself to do that more, and that, yeah, that is a good thing to do. When we assist others, it does fuel us as well.
Yeah.
Connecting to others' lives, contributing to others' lives can increase our own sense of purpose. Connection is reciprocal. We make others feel valued, and that sort of we reinforce our own value as well. Although, and again, I do think that there's an aspect to which we can give, we can sometimes overgive, and then it's okay to pull
Yeah.
back. There is no reciprocity because that happens sometimes. And also, too, the thing I actually took away from this book is that mattering is relational. It's built in
Yeah.
everyday interactions. It's
Yeah.
not about the big achievements. It's actually just the small everyday stuff. And having a book that reminds you that actually that is really where it counts was worth reading, just to be reminded of that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think it was a second point you made there around, helping others. I think the caution there is around boundaries, and not constantly going out and helping everyone
Yes,
to your own cost.
correct.
So making sure that you're also helping yourself and
Mm.
making sure that, yeah, you've got some boundaries around that. And as you say, like if you're constantly helping someone and there's never anything coming back the other way, then you might want to think about how much you're
Right.
helping that
Yeah,
person. But
absolutely.
yeah, no, I thought it was good, not just from a career perspective, but kind of personal relationships as well. I thought there was a lot to be taken,
Yeah.
from that as well, and how you can make, the people closest to you in your life also feel like they matter,
Mm.
which when you're in the trenches of parenthood and carrying responsibilities, that can be really hard, right? You're just
Yeah.
busy and you're not necessarily saying thank you all the time, but actually it's nice to be, if someone says thank you, even when you're like
Yes.
in the trenches, that makes it a little bit more
Yeah,
bearable,
for
I think.
sure.
So yeah. So look, I thought that your choice of book, I thought that your choice of book was quite good. I enjoyed it in the end.
Excellent. Oh, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, that my choice matters to you and that I feel seen and appreciated. So thank you, Shayla.
I wasn't as critical of your choice as you were of mine.
No, well, look, maybe you're just a nicer person.
All right. Well, Outlaws, we reckon it's worth getting the book and having a read of it, that you're going to learn some things if you do. So, yeah, the link is on the website and in our
Mhm,
newsletters. So take a listen.
mhm.
And then next week is going to be our final episode of
Yep.
season 2.
Episode
And
20 of
so,
season 2. How have we done
wow,
this? Almost 40 episodes of a podcast. That's pretty great.
crazy.
Hey, I appreciate and see you, Shayla, for saying,
So,
hey, let's do a podcast. And it's been a lot of fun. Not that that sounds
well,
like we're finishing. We're not. We do have plans for a third season.
yeah, yeah.
We'll take a bit of a gap, and we've already got some really interesting guests lined up and some books, and we'll do some different things, I think, as well. But we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, but if you've got some ideas that you'd like us to do or guests that you'd like us to interview, please send us an email at contact@outlawspodcast.com. We're always keen to hear different ideas and see what people think. So
Mm.
have a great week, Kate.
You too. I'll see you next week for our recap episode where we'll go back through all the people we've spoken to this season and all the ideas that they've shared with us. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, same. Okay, talk
Alrighty.
soon. Bye.
See ya. Bye.